Local Houston native, Rebecca Grahl is a professional DC tour guide with more than a decade's experience in public history, museum education, and tourism. As a local guide, Rebecca works with a wide array of audiences, developing tours on a variety of topics with a special focus on women's history. She's particularly proud of her involvement with A Tour of Her Own, the first tour company in DC to focus exclusively on women's history. She is a proud graduate of Randolph-Macon Women's College, holding a Bachelor of Arts in American Culture and active in her alumni organization. Rebecca is a member of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, as well as an alum and senior leader with the National Society Children of the American Revolution. Rebecca can be seen on Mysteries at the Museum on the Travel Channel, is a lead contributor and researcher for the Tour Guide Tell All podcast, and has been featured in local press outlets such as WAMU, The Washingtonian, Washington City Paper, Trip Hacks, DC Podcast, and more. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome Rebecca Grahl to the program. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here. I was just saying that I'm a native of Houston, so it's so wonderful to get to be here with the council in Houston. What I'm going to be doing is I'll be sharing my screen. I'll be sharing some stories with you guys about the White House, the area surrounding it, and we're definitely going to make this happy hour appropriate. It's going to be a little bit PG-13 rated R. We'll talk a little about drinking, adultery, murder, duels, all kinds of fun stuff. During the tour, if you have questions, you can use the Q&A box and I will do my best to answer your questions along the way. But at the end of the tour as well, we'll definitely have a chance for you guys to ask questions. So don't be shy if there's something you want to know more about. So let me just get this going here. Excellent. So we call this tour Secrets and Scandals, our Secrets and Scandal tour. I'll give it just a minute here to load. There we go. Normally, this tour would take place outside the White House at nighttime. The White House is, of course, such an iconic part of Washington, D.C., and at night in particular, when it's illuminated, it's just so beautiful. Surrounding the White House is a cluster of historic buildings making up Lafayette Square Park. So normally on the tour, that's where we would be. Now, let's just start with the White House a little bit, though, just so you have a little bit of information about the White House. That's my foster dog behind me, so sorry. Sorry about that. The White House is one of the most iconic buildings in Washington, D.C. Not too surprising, it was the first building to have the first federal building to have its cornerstone laid in the new nation's capital. We have George Washington to thank for the number one thing I hear about the White House from tourists, which is that it's a lot smaller than they expect. I think because of the movies, when you see the White House on the big screen before the aliens invade and Channing Tatum has to put on a tank top and save us all, it looks so massive up on the big screen. But in real life, it's not anywhere near the tallest building in DC or the biggest building at all. That was completely George Washington. George Washington was responsible for overseeing the design and the construction of the building. Washington wanted a beautiful, stately, executive mansion. We were a young country. He obviously wanted our president to be taken seriously. But George Washington wanted to make it very clear that we were going to be a democracy and not a monarchy. So he didn't want this building to be a castle or a palace. And one thing that I think is really remarkable is that even today in 2021, 221 years after the building was completed, that, despite all the additions, all the expansions, look at this building. This is not a castle. It's not a palace. It is a stately, modest structure as George Washington sort of intended. Now, the White House today has over 132 rooms, 35 restrooms, 27 fireplaces, 144 doors, 3 elevators. It has its own doctor's office, its own dentist's office. It has a 60-seater movie theater, a 2-lane bowling alley, putting green, tennis court, basketball court, swimming pool, the hot tub jacuzzi, an organic vegetable kitchen garden, its own pastry shop, its own floor shop, its own chocolate shop, 3 full-time cooks, and of course, a backyard big enough to land your own private helicopter on. So it's about 50,000 square feet of real estate that you get for free when you are elected president of the United States. So not too shabby. The picture that you're looking at here is of the executive mansion. This is the oldest part of the building. This gives us kind of an idea of what the White House has looked like for a good chunk of its history. Looks pretty small if you look at it from kind of this direction. But if you take a look at this little animated video, and there's no sound on the video, this gives you a little bit of a breakdown of what the White House sort of looks like. This is the south front side of the White House, the image I showed you before. was the north front side. You can see from the south front side that the White House is actually 4 stories above ground. There are 2 stories below ground that they tell us about. And then you can see there are 2 additions to the White House. So we see the executive mansion, which is essentially the residence and kind of public rooms. These are things you would see on a White House tour if you were to tour the White House. And then we have 2 wings that have been added onto the building, the East Wing and the West Wing. The West Wing is the most famous, of course, because that is where the Oval Office is located. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more later on the tour about some of the scandals that have happened within the White House. But let's talk a little bit about some of what you might see in Lafayette Square Park. So you can see in this kind of image down here, this is the north front side of the White House, and it faces a park called Lafayette Square Park, named for the Marquis de Lafayette. And in the center of this park is not a statue to Lafayette, because that would be too obvious. It is a statue of Andrew Jackson, President Andrew Jackson. I could probably do an entire 40-minute scandal tour about Andrew Jackson. His life is sort of insane. He grows up on the western frontier of the young United States. He actually serves in the American Revolution when he's a teenager. He's going to be held captive during the American Revolution as a prisoner of war when he's 14 years old. He's going to live on the frontier. He's going to fight Native Americans. He's going to be a military man. He's going to live this very rough and tumble life. Depending on which historian you believe, he was in anywhere from 5 to 15 duels in his lifetime. And we do know for a fact that he killed at least one man in a duel, a man named Charles Dickinson in 1806. Dickinson had accused Andrew Jackson of cheating in a horse race, or a bet on a horse race, which you never accuse Jackson of cheating. So of course, he insults Andrew Jackson, and Jackson challenges him to a duel. The 2 men face off, and Jackson insists that Dickinson shoot first. Dickinson shoots and misses. Jackson aims right for Dickinson's heart, shoots him right in the chest, and walks away. So you wouldn't want to get on the bad side of Andrew Jackson. Underneath, though, that kind of rough exterior, you can see, oh, sorry, I do see something in the chat here. Oh, that's just a welcome. Okay. So you can see here this Andrew Jackson, kind of young, on the right side of the screen. And then you can see this is his wife, the woman who would become his wife, Rachel Donaldson. So Jackson was actually kind of a bit of a romantic. He is, living his life, military guy, lawyer on the frontier. And then he meets this beautiful woman, Rachel Donaldson, and he just falls head over heels in love with her. They court and marry very quickly in 1791. They are very much in love and very happy for about 3 years. And in 1794, they run into a problem. The problem is that technically Rachel is still married to her first husband. So at the time, 1794, she is married to 2 men at once, which is bigamy, which is illegal in the United States. Now, the story of Rachel's bigamy is a little bit of a he said, she said tale. Rachel's version goes a little bit something like this. She was 18 years old when she married a man named Louis Robards. Robards, by her account, was a drunk. He was an abuser. He was a cruel and mean man who kept her away from her family, who did not provide a good home for her. And after putting up with this for a little while, she runs away to live with her mother. And while she's living with her mother rented rooms to make money, to bring in income. And one of the men who rented a room from Rachel's mother's home was Andrew Jackson. Rachel meets Andrew Jackson. He's got experience with the law, and he is going to help her obtain a divorce from this terrible man. And then Rachel will marry Andrew Jackson, thinking that she is divorced. So that seems like, we've all been there. That seems understanding enough. Not too surprising, Louis Robards is going to tell a different version of the story. Louis says he marries Rachel at 18, but she's not some innocent babe in the woods. She's a flirt. She's a worldly woman. He implies that she was not, chaste when they first met. He says that Rachel and he were happily married until all of a sudden Rachel runs away to start an affair with Andrew Jackson. And he implies that she and Jackson have started to see each other long before Louis Robards wrote to a judge and asked for a divorce. The problem from a historian perspective is we really don't know who's telling the truth. There are very few court documents from this time. There was very little law and order on the frontier. So we really have no way to know if either one of them's telling the truth. I'll be honest, I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. Either way, in 1794, Rachel will finally get divorced from Louis Robards, and she will remarry Andrew Jackson, this time as her only husband. For the two of them, it's no big deal. They love each other. They're going to go on and live a very happy life. But Andrew Jackson is going to enter into politics. So this is the kind of thing that is not going to stay a secret. Now, Andrew Jackson, which he looks a little bit more like how we remember him here on the right of the screen, Andrew Jackson will run unsuccessfully for president in 1824. And so he runs again in 1828. The election in 1824 was hotly contested. It was what he called the corrupt bargain. Jackson felt that DC elites had kept him from the presidency. So he runs a very vigorous campaign in 1828. And he's running against this guy, who you can tell is super fun at parties. That's John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams couldn't be like more different from Andrew Jackson. John Quincy Adams is the son, the eldest son of our second president, John Adams. He's kind of like an East Coast elite. You know, son of a president. He was an ambassador starting at the age of 14. He's been in government his entire life, you know, went to an Ivy League school, you know, sort of just like destined to be president of the United States. And so Jackson and Adams are going to be facing off in 1828 in a really, really tumultuous election. I think we tend to think today that our modern elections are a lot tougher or rougher than they used to be, but elections in the 19th century were crazy. People would write all kinds of things in the newspaper. There was not a lot of fact checking back then. So there were all kinds of crazy things that would get printed. And you can see these are the kinds of like flyers and broadsheets that would be put out. They always used a lot of really explosive language. So you have this sort of pro-Jackson flyer, you know, Jackson forever, the hero of two wars, and sort of references the Battle of New Orleans here. And then you can see sort of an anti-Jackson that sort of talks about all of his bloody deeds and all the people who have died because of Andrew Jackson. Now, the election is not going very well for John Quincy Adams, despite kind of everything that's in the press about Jackson. And so John Quincy Adams decides to take it a step further. He's going to do something that up to this point in American history had not been done. He's going to drag the wife into the campaign. He is going to make sure that his associates in the press know about Rachel Donaldson's bigamy. And this is going to be printed in newspapers up and down the East Coast. A lot of untrue things about Rachel are going to be printed. They're going to call her a prostitute. They're going to say that that's how she made money, that her mother was running a brothel. They're going to actually, there'll be rumors and insinuations in the press that Andrew Jackson loaned his wife out for sexual favors to political allies. So this stuff gets printed in the paper. Rachel's name gets dragged through the mud. She's being called a bigamist. And Andrew Jackson is livid. He gets really, really upset. Understandably, that's his beloved wife. Now, this doesn't do John Quincy Adams any good. John Quincy Adams is going to lose the election in 1828. Andrew Jackson is going to ride a huge populist wave into the White House, but it comes at a terrible price. Andrew Jackson is going to be elected in November of 1828. Rachel, who was already in very poor health, is going to perish before he's inaugurated as president. So he's going to lose his beloved wife. He's going to be convinced for the rest of his life that the election killed her, that this campaign killed her, that all of these rumors caused her death. Now, he will be kind of carry this vendetta against John Quincy Adams for the rest of his life. Andrew Jackson would say that he could forgive a man anything, but he would never forgive a scoundrel who hurt the woman he loved. That said, we know Jackson killed that one guy, so I don't know if he could forgive anything. My favorite story about Andrew Jackson, as a little side note, is that Jackson in his later life had a pet parrot named Polly. He was very, very fond of this pet parrot. He would keep the parrot in his office. He would keep it with him all the time. And this parrot was really smart, and he learned to say all kinds of things that Andrew Jackson taught him. And when Andrew Jackson died, he, in his will, in his plans, he wanted to have his funeral at his home in Tennessee, the Hermitage. And on the invite list, he specifically invited Polly the parrot. So you can imagine it's like a presidential funeral. There are 100 people in attendance and one parrot, like in the second row, right near the front. And while the preacher is up there eulogizing Andrew Jackson, this parrot decides to join in. And the parrot starts squawking all the words it knows. But because it was a parrot that lived with Andrew Jackson, who knew his way around an obscenity, what this parrot lets out is just a string of profanity. And it is so bad that the parrot had to be escorted out of Jackson's funeral. So you know that you were kind of a badass dude if your foul-mouthed parrot gets kicked out of your funeral. Now, if we were to kind of stroll along the edge of Lafayette Square Park, we would see this beautiful building here on the corner. Oops, one too far. This beautiful building here on the corner. This is the Decatur House. You can see a drawing that sort of shows what the Decatur House looked like when it was the only house on that block. It is named for the man who had it built, Stephen Decatur. Stephen Decatur is a great naval hero from the United States. He's kind of this young, handsome man who's very popular around town. He's, dashing in a uniform. Women want him, men want to be him. That's his kind of vibe. But anytime you're really handsome, really charming, really outgoing, you might have some enemies. And Decatur is going to form an enemy that will lead to a very long disagreement, I will say, and ultimately result in bloodshed. So our story centers around three men in the United States Navy: Stephen Decatur, James Buren, and William Bainbridge. So initially, our kind of conflict is between Decatur and Buren. Stephen Decatur and James Buren have known each other in the Navy for many years. Buren is not a fan of Decatur's. He's about 10 years older than Decatur. As you can see, he's not quite as handsome. Buren was always kind of struggling with money, not as maybe cultured as Decatur. And so Buren does not like him. Things are going to get really bad when it sort of hits ahead at a party. James Buren is going to imply that Stephen Decatur has a woman in every port. He's basically going to say something ungentlemanly about Stephen Decatur and his love life. Now, today, we kind of would be like, that's not so bad. And if you know men in the U.S. Navy, that's really not the worst thing they could say. But Decatur is offended by this implication. He considers himself a gentleman. He would by no means be keeping a woman in every port. Decatur, though, is going to wait for a better opportunity to get revenge than rather strike out at Buren at a party. So he waits until the next year. The next year, 1807, Buren is court-martialed by the United States Navy because his ship has been deemed unprepared for battle. And on the kind of panel, a tribunal of judges for this court-martial is Stephen Decatur. So now Decatur has Buren's career in the palm of his hand. And of course, Decatur is going to use it to get a little revenge. He is going to push for a very harsh sentence for James Buren, basically 5-year suspension from the United States Navy without pay. And to make kind of insult to injury, he's going to put Buren's ship under his command. Now, as far as Stephen Decatur is concerned, even Stevens, you insulted me. I kind of, gave you a little hit on your career. We're good. But Buren is livid. This is his livelihood. And now Decatur has taken it all away. Buren is going to go away to Europe for several years. He's going to kind of lick his wounds there. But while he's living in Europe, the United States is going to enter its second war, the War of 1812. This is our second war with the British. This is a big naval war. So men like Stephen Decatur are going to be serving and fighting, and they're going to be earning a lot of accolades and kind of notoriety. Buren desperately wants to come back to fight in the War of 1812, but he has gone bankrupt in Europe and he does not have the money to come back. He will write to the U.S. Navy several times, begging them to send him home so he can fight, and they never reply to his letters. By the time Buren gets back to Washington, D.C., it's 1819, so it's almost 10 years after he left. Everybody's sort of forgotten him. He's a nobody, and Stephen Decatur is a huge hero. He's a war hero from the War of 1812. He's newly married. He's begun construction, just completed this beautiful house here. So, Decatur's kind of on the top of the world, and Buren is livid. Now, I don't know if this disagreement would have gone further than Buren just sort of sulking if it hadn't been for the machinations of this man, William Bainbridge. Bainbridge is also in the U.S. Navy. He is also not a fan of Stephen Decatur, but he plays his cards very close to the chest. He has disliked Decatur for like 15 years, but right around the time that Buren comes back from Europe, Bainbridge writes Decatur a letter. Basically says, let bygones be bygones. I know we used to not be friends. Let's be pals now. And Stephen Decatur is like, cool, let's be friends. That sounds great. And just around this same time, as Buren's sort of fuming about Decatur, Bainbridge starts planting seeds in Decatur's mind. Buren's going around town. He's talking about you. He's accusing you of stealing his career. He's bad mouthing you around town. And Decatur, he kind of takes the bait and he writes to Bainbridge and says, "Where was that coward when we were fighting the War of 1812?" And when that gets back to Buren challenges Stephen Decatur to a duel. Now, I know we talk about duels today and we're like, that's so barbaric, that's so crazy. Duels were super common in the early 1800s. Men didn't duel because they thought they were going to die. They dueled to sort of protect their honor. Of course, by the time this duel happens, the United States Navy had outlawed dueling because they were losing so many officers to the practice. So it was really deadly, but men kept doing it anyway because that makes sense. Now, Buren challenges Decatur to a duel. Decatur will accept to defend his honor. And I don't know how many of you on this webinar have ever been in a duel, but you don't do it alone. Each person participating in the duel has a second. Your second is your guy. They're going to negotiate the terms of the duel, ideally in your favor. They're going to have your back. They're going to be there with you. And what you really want your second to do is negotiate a peace before shots are ever fired. Now, Decatur is going to ask about a half dozen men to be his second. None of them will say yes. You can probably guess who volunteers. William Bainbridge, the man who hated him for 15 years and now all of a sudden out of nowhere is his new best friend. So Bainbridge will be Decatur's second. And when he starts negotiating the terms of the duel, I think it becomes very obvious where Bainbridge interests lie. When it comes time for the duel, which will take place in 1820, March of 1820, Bainbridge is going to meet with Buren's second, and Bainbridge is going to suggest, because Buren is short-sighted, that the two men should only pace about 6 paces away from each other. So instead of going 10 or 15, the two men dueling are going to be very close. And then Bainbridge will also suggest, because both men are naval officers, that they should begin the duel with their pistols loaded, pointed, and ready. So he's basically guaranteeing bloodshed. On the day of the duel, which takes place in Bladensburg, Maryland, back then it was called the Bloody Run because so many duels took place there, the soil would run red with blood when it rained. On the day of the duel, Buren's second approaches Bainbridge with an offer of peace. For Decatur's benefit, Bainbridge will refuse to hear it. So Decatur and Buren face off. They're standing very close to each other. They each fire one shot. And you can probably guess what happens. Both of these men are going to collapse on the ground, both of them with a bullet inside of them. Now, Buren is going to cry out to Decatur, "My dear friend, could you ever forgive me?" And as Decatur is being carried off, he's heard saying, "Buren, I forgive you from the bottom of my heart." Stephen Decatur is brought back to his home in Lafayette Square Park, where he will die a few hours later. His young wife's wails were heard outside by the people standing vigil. Buren would survive. He'd survive with a bullet inside of him for the rest of his life. He lives into his 80s. Buren would always say he did not feel responsible for Decatur's death because he was forgiven on the field of the duel. And we don't know a lot about William Bainbridge after this point. He seems to just go on and live a normal life. But I think William Bainbridge got exactly what he wanted, which was Stephen Decatur dead without ever having to pull a trigger. Now, if you visit the Decatur House today, it's home to the White House Historical Association. So they have events and programs there. When you do the event with David Rubenstein, he's a supporter of the White House Historical Association. But there is a plaque here, which does kind of accommodate or acknowledge the duel. You can also go out to sort of Bladensburg and see the dueling grounds, as they're called on the sign, where the duel took place. But dueling would continue all the way up just before the Civil War. Now, we're going to talk about another murder. This is maybe a little bit more planned than the other, but we'll see. So I want to tell you about a man named Daniel Sickles. Daniel Sickles is probably my favorite crazy person in American history. He lived in a house right along Lafayette Square Park. His house is no longer standing today, but it would have looked something like the Decatur House right along the park there. You can already tell from Daniel Sickles' mustache, he's kind of a crazy guy. He's from New York. He is a larger than life carrier. He has a just huge appetite for women, for food, for smoking, for women, for drinking, for women. By the time he is 18, he's sort of known as this roue around New York City, and he's said to be on a first name basis with every woman of ill repute in the city. Naturally, he's going to become a politician and he gets elected to the New York State Legislature. He definitely makes he's going to make a bit of a splash in the New York State Legislature. He's known for bringing a known prostitute onto the floor during a vote. And a little bit later, a few years later, when he's sent in a delegation to go to England to meet the Queen, he brings with him the madam of the largest brothel in New York City. And you can't just introduce a madam to the Queen of England. So, of course, he's going to give her a fake name. The fake name that she uses is the name of the wife of the man who'd run against Sickles in his previous election. So naturally, Daniel Sickles gets elected to Congress and he comes to Washington, D.C. to serve in the House of Representatives. Now, when he comes to D.C., though, he doesn't come alone because right around the time of his election, just a little bit before, he has fallen in love at the age of 33, 34, 35, 36. He lied about his age, so we don't know how old he was, but he was probably older than 33. At the age of 33, he has fallen in love and he's married Teresa, who was 16 at the time of their marriage. When I say 16, she was probably actually younger than that, but 16 was the legal age. So he had known her since she was a baby. She is very different from Daniel Sickles. She grows up in a very sort of strict Catholic upbringing. She's very quiet, very reserved, very different from Daniel Sickles. And they come to Washington, D.C., and he's a congressman, and she's sort of the shy young woman, just in her teens. And he kind of basically tells her, look, honey, I'm going to handle politics. You just stay at home. You play the piano. You practice your French. You needlepoint. Do whatever ladies do. I'll take care of the politicking. And by politicking, I mean Daniel Sickles went around Washington, D.C., partying, drinking, and getting to know all the women of ill repute in D.C. So he was often seen in the company of women. None of them were Teresa. Now, this goes on for a few years, but finally, in 1859, Teresa's had enough. She's had enough of this. She is going to start an affair with a man. She's going to kind of take on like a little gentleman caller. This is going to continue on for a few months. Daniel Sickles will be at a party. Another member of Congress will come up to him, and the man will tell Daniel Sickles, I know of a man who has more use of your wife than you do. And Daniel Sickles knows exactly what the man is implying, and he comes home and he beats Teresa within an inch of her life. Teresa will confess that yes, she has been carrying on an affair. And Daniel Sickles is heartbroken. He can't believe that she would violate the sanctity of their marriage vows in this way, despite the fact that he's been out violating them every night. He demands to know how she carried on this subterfuge. She said she would stand in the second-story window of their house and she would look out into Lafayette Square Park. Her lover would stand underneath a tree and he would wave a white handkerchief from his pocket. And if Teresa was alone in the house, she would wave a white handkerchief in the window, and that was the sign that he could come to the door. So Daniel Sickles will wait at the upstairs window. And sure enough, a well-dressed man appears underneath the tree and he's waving a white handkerchief. So Daniel Sickles waves a white handkerchief back in the window and the man comes to the door. Daniel Sickles is going to come out of the front door. He's going to come basically guns blazing. He's going to have a pistol in one hand. He's going to shoot once, hitting the man in the wrist. He's going to shoot again, hitting the man in the groin. The man is unarmed. He has not brought pistols with him. The only thing he has are opera glasses. So he throws his opera glasses at Daniel Sickles. The man is going to collapse. He's going to be clinging to life. And Daniel Sickles goes to see this man, to look at the face of the man who's been with his wife. And he realizes he knows exactly who this guy is. The man he has shot is a man named Philip Barton Key. That name may not mean a lot to you today. You're probably more familiar with Francis Scott Key, the man who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, the poem that became our national anthem. This is one of his sons. Kind of more importantly for Daniel Sickles, Philip Barton Key at the time was the district attorney of the District of Columbia. So he's just shot the city's DA. Daniel Sickles flees the scene of the crime. He's going to run away. Barton Key is going to be carried across the park and he dies within minutes. So this is definitely a murder. After a few hours on the lam, Sickles turns himself in. He's a member of Congress. There were witnesses to this. Like, he's got to turn himself over. Going to jail when you're a congressman, though, is a little different. He is kept in the jailer's private apartment. He is given a daily ration of bourbon and rye. He is allowed visitors. He's allowed cigars. He has members of Congress visiting him. He gets a letter from President James Buchanan wishing him a speedy acquittal. And he is allowed to have a number of female visitors. So we know women who are not Teresa came to visit him. So, jail's not too shabby if you're a congressman. Now he's going to have to hire a lawyer, a very good one, and he hires this man, Edwin Stanton. Stanton would become a little more famous a few years later as Secretary of War under President Abraham Lincoln, but Stanton was considered one of the best legal minds of the day. You can imagine the trial of Daniel Sickles is quite interesting in DC. People want to see what's going to happen. Edwin Stanton is going to basically argue in court that Daniel Sickles is not to blame. I think we all know who's really responsible for the death of Philip Barton Key. Teresa. Stanton is going to argue that it was Teresa's infidelity and her deception that drove Daniel Sickles out of his mind and drove him to commit this terrible act. He is going to argue temporary insanity caused by Teresa and really paint Daniel Sickles as a loving, devoted husband, which is pretty laughable. Of course, it's an all-male jury. They only need like 30 minutes before they come back, and they find Daniel Sickles not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. This is the first time in the United States this will ever work successfully in a court of law. So Daniel Sickles is going to walk away a free man. He is going to be reelected the next year. He's going to be considered kind of the toast of the town. People are going to love him. The only sort of criticism he gets is he doesn't divorce Teresa. They stay married, and he actually gets some hate mail from women in particular who can't believe he stayed with her. Now, this is not where Daniel Sickles' stories ends. Daniel Sickles is going to go on and serve in the Civil War. Daniel Sickles really, really, really wants to be a Civil War military officer, but he's like not very good at it. So he kind of buys his way in, but he has no idea what he's doing. And he ends up at the Battle of Gettysburg. And if you know a little bit about Battle of Gettysburg, you've maybe heard Sickles' name there. He's going to be in charge of a group of men. His men have been told to stay where they are, but Sickles instead decides to charge into an orchard. He is going to be hit by a cannonball, which you can see here on the screen. He is going to have his leg amputated. Now, he doesn't want the men under his command to panic when he's going to his amputation, so he is seen smoking a cigar and waving as he's being carried to the amputation tent. He kept this leg and the cannonball on his desk for the rest of his life. He would then loan it to the Army and loan it out to other groups. Today, it's in the National Museum of Health and Medicine, which was formerly part of the Department of the Army. Now, Daniel Sickles, like all kind of good, crazy people, lives forever. He lives to his 90s. Again, we don't really know his real age, but he lives to be 92, 93, 94, 95. He was actually a big proponent for preserving the battlefield of Gettysburg. These pictures of him later in life signing autographs and attending veterans events, these are taken at Gettysburg. He would attend a lot of reunions. There was supposed to be a bust to Sickles at Gettysburg at one point, but all the money that got raised was kind of disappeared into Daniel Sickles' pocket. And he was asked later in life why there wasn't a memorial to him at Gettysburg. And he is quoted as saying, "All of Gettysburg battlefield is a memorial to the bravery of Daniel Sickles." He's buried today at Arlington National Cemetery, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his service. So definitely one of the more fascinating scoundrels in American history. Now, as we come around the corner of Lafayette Square Park, you might notice this building here. You've maybe seen this in the contemporary day. This is known as the Blair House. The Blair House was owned by the Blair family, and lots of notable political types lived here in the 19th century. But during the 20th century, under the presidency of Franklin D. Roosevelt, it was acquired by the United States government, the executive branch, and it's used today kind of as a guest house for the White House. So when we have notables visiting from other countries, they often will stay at the Blair House. Former presidents will stay at the Blair House. You can see the American flag is flying, but when we host, say, a prime minister or royalty from another country, if they stay at the Blair House, we fly their national flag as a show of respect. Now, there was one president who actually lived in the Blair House for a time, and that was President Harry S. Truman. During the time that Truman is president, the White House was literally falling down around him. His daughter, Margaret, put a piano in her bedroom, which seemed like a cute idea until the leg of the piano fell through the floor into the ceiling of the state dining room. That was not so good. So during Truman's presidency, the whole interior had to be gutted, and he lived at the Blair House. Now, some of my tour guide friends laugh when I say I talk about Truman on my scandal tour, but he did have a bit of a scandalous side. The first kind of scandal in his time was actually when he was vice president. You can see this photograph here. He was vice president for a short time at the beginning of FDR's fourth term, and we were in the middle of World War II. Truman was a pretty talented piano player, so he would go play the piano for the USO, and at one of the USO stops, this beautiful starlet, this is Lauren Bacall, she's about 19 years old in this photo, jumped up on the piano, flashing her legs, and there she is smiling down at Harry Truman. Now, of course, this was in a bunch of newspapers. The photo was captured by Associated Press, and Truman's wife saw it. Now, this is his wife, Bess. He called Bess the boss because she really, really was. He was deeply devoted to Bess. She was definitely a woman he had been chasing his whole life and was happy to get her. And they wrote thousands of letters in their marriage. The letter she writes after seeing him with Lauren Bacall is my favorite letter. It says, "Dear Harry, you are never to play piano in public again. You look like a fool. Love, Bess." And he never did. After this point, he never played piano publicly again. Now, Bess was kind of not a political wife. She didn't really like being in DC. She didn't like being stuck at the White House. So she left DC every summer. So she would leave Harry Truman kind of unattended at the Blair House for 3 months every year. And for a lot of other presidents, this is probably where I would tell you like about a mistress or about like a party. But other than a little gambling and a little bourbon, Truman didn't really get into too much trouble. One of my favorite kind of Truman stories comes at Labor Day, 1949. Bess has been gone all summer. She comes back to the Blair House. They're at the Blair House. They're having dinner. They're catching up, and they retire rather early. They've clearly missed each other, and they want some time alone. Next morning, though, Bess is acting not very boss-like. She's acting a little weird, a little sketchy, and she's trying to talk to the staff at the Blair House. She's trying to tell them that there's a problem, but she won't just come out and say it. So finally, the chief usher says, "Ma'am, it doesn't matter what the problem is. I will be discreet, but if you don't tell me what's wrong, I can't help you." And she just sort of says sheepishly, "We're going to have to repair the president's antique bed. 3 slats were broken last night." So yeah, they broke the bed at the Blair House. I think that's really cute with his wife. It's very charming. Now, unfortunately, the most kind of famous incident with Truman at the Blair House is not so funny. Truman would be targeted for an assassination attempt during his time as president. He's going to be attacked in November of 1950 by 2 Puerto Rican nationalists. The 2 nationalists will approach the Blair House. At the time, there would have been security officers, policemen, Secret Service stationed out front. They're going to open fire. One gunman is going to be killed right away. The other will be wounded, but there will be one Secret Service policeman, one officer who's going to be shot 4 times, Leslie Kofelt. He'll be shot 4 times. He'll be taken to the hospital, and he will die 4 hours later. This makes Leslie Kofelt very unique in American history. He's the only person to be killed defending the president during an assassination attempt. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery, and you can actually see in the photo here, that's Truman and Bess attending their funeral. And there is a plaque just outside of the Blair House to honor Kofelt's sacrifice. Now, a little just kind of quick bite on presidential drinking. During this part of the tour, we would be walking by a couple of popular bars and places to grab a drink near the White House. So I have to say, most of our presidents have been drinkers. This is John Adams. In short, I'm getting nothing that I can drink, and I believe I shall be sick from this cause alone. John Adams drank a hard cider every morning. He was a hard cider drinker, and he was a supporter of craft brewing. Most of our presidents have been big drinkers, but a few that I like to mention. Old George Washington. Washington, not so much a big drinker. He believed in moderation in all things, but he was a big producer of alcohol. He had a grist mill and a distillery at his estate at Mount Vernon. At the time of his death, he was the largest whiskey distiller in the country. So he definitely made most of his money through distilling. Thomas Jefferson, like myself, a big fan of wine. Jefferson had served as Secretary of State, so he had traveled to Europe. He used 3 months of his time as Secretary of State to go on a wine tasting tour, which, just spending tax dollars money to taste wine. He was a vintner himself, so he did grow grapes and attempt to make wine. His home of Monticello, he would go through an average of 400 bottles a year. But at the White House, he went through much more. He actually added a wine cellar to the White House when he was president, big enough to hold 20,000 bottles. And one year he was said to have spent $4,000 on wine, which would be about 20% of the presidential salary. So Jefferson, big fan of wine. James Madison drank a pint of whiskey every day. This was probably medicinal. Madison was believed to be epileptic, so he likely would have had a little bit throughout the day to keep things like seizures at bay, but that is still a pretty healthy dose of whiskey to take in. Of course, back then you couldn't drink the water because of bacteria, so whiskey was probably a better bet. He also was a big fan of champagne at parties. He actually had a big inauguration party at a place called Gadsby's Tavern, but he did complain that champagne would give him a terrible hangover. A president we don't talk about a lot is Martin Van Buren. Martin Van Buren was quite the drinker. He could really hold his own. They called him Blue Whiskey Van because he could drink whiskey until you were blue in the face. He was never seen drunk and said to be able to hold copious amounts. Franklin D. Roosevelt was a huge fan of cocktail hour. He would host what he called children's hour, which were sort of mandatory cocktail hours at the White House. The rules were basically that everybody had to have a good time and he had to make all the drinks. His favorite drink was a rum swizzle, and that is what he would make for people, although he was known to mix up some others, but rum swizzles were his favorite. Eleanor did not attend. She did not enjoy children's hour. And then being from Texas, I have to mention Lyndon B Johnson. Johnson would go to his ranch. He would get his Secret Service agents to go to the liquor store and stock up on the cheapest scotch you could buy. So he liked scotch, but only if it was cheap. And when he was driving around the ranch, he would just stick his arm kind of out of the window with the cup. And the Secret Service agents would have to hop out of their car, run over, top him off, and then off he'd go. And then, 20 minutes later, he'd stick the arm out the window and they'd top him off. You should never trust a drink, though, if it came from LBJ. You'd end up with what was called the Johnson treatment, which was his way of kind of bullying, intimidating people. Anytime he was hosting somebody for drinks, he would tell his staff to make his drink really, really weak and make the person he was meeting with drink really, really strong. So you wanted to make sure that he always had the mental edge and that people were getting drunk unbeknowingly or unknowns to them whenever he was negotiating. Now, probably the biggest drinker that people don't know about among our presidents is this man, Franklin Pierce. I like to call him Franklin Pierce Secretly Fierce because he's so handsome. Franklin Pierce, this is his wife. Jane and his son, Benny, their only child. He is going to be elected. He is going to be traveling after his election, but before his inauguration on a train. The train is going to derail, and Benny is going to be the only casualty of that train accident. So they lose their son just before they move into the White House. Franklin Pierce deals with the grief by kind of losing himself in a bottle. He had already had a bit of a drinking problem, but once Benny dies, he really just turns to alcohol. His drinking will be so bad that at one point while he's president, he's going to be drunkenly riding his horse. He will run over a woman and she will die as a result of the accident. When he discovers that he's not been re-nominated, his party has not nominated him for a second term, he says there is nothing left to do but get drunk, which he did, and he died not too long after cirrhosis of the liver. Most people, when they think about presidents drinking, though, think about this guy, President Ulysses S. Grant. I'm going to tell you the truth about Grant. People think he was a drunk. He definitely struggled with alcohol, but it's maybe not so much that he drank a lot. He just wasn't very good at drinking. He was a bit of a lightweight. He got sick very easily. It impacted him really easily, but he just couldn't always resist it. He would be sort of belittled during his time in the Civil War because of his drinking, but despite that, he goes on, of course, to be kind of the hero of the Union Army. Now, when he becomes president of the United States, he really doesn't like it. He finds that politicians are annoying. He really misses kind of the schedule of being a military man. So he finds a bar that he really likes. It's in a hotel that's called the Willard. This is what the Willard looks like today. The current building dates to 1901. This is what the Willard looked like in the 19th century. So this is more like what Grant would have seen. But inside, there used to be a bar, a whiskey and cigar bar, men only, and that became Grant's hangout. He would leave the White House, which is just a couple minutes walk from the Willard. He'd walk over, cut through the lobby, and sit down to order a drink. Now, DC is a small town. Everybody knows everybody else's business. And so it starts to get to a point when people realize you don't go to the White House to see Grant. If you want to talk to President Grant, you just hang out in the lobby of the Willard. And so when Grant comes through to go to the bar, everybody's waiting for him in the lobby. It apparently gets so bad in his second term that he complains to his staff that he can no longer go to the Willard because of all the damn lobbyists. Now, the Willard Hotel will tell you that's how the word lobbyist was invented. Sadly, the word already existed, but it certainly popularizes the word in our culture. And now, finally, I think the last thing we have to talk about is presidents and sex. Now, I've been a tour guide for a long time, like 8 years, and I can tell you people ask me all the time about what presidents had affairs and which presidents cheated on their wives, and there were a lot. But if I were to talk about the worst kind of sexual deviant in the White House, there's really only one name that comes to mind, and it's Warren G. Harding. I know, look at that face, that guy with that face, Warren G. Harding. Warren G. Harding is going to carry on a 20-year affair with his best friend and neighbor's wife. 20 years with your best friend and neighbor's wife. That's pretty low down. He's going to carry on this affair with this woman, Carrie Fulton Phillips. Now, this goes on for 20 years. They are pretty blatant about it. They're going to travel together. They're going to travel as a foursome with their spouses and slip away for little assignations. They're going to make excuses to travel. He'll take her to see his sick aunt. She will come and help him with work business. And they just carry this on kind of under everybody's noses. Now, eventually, the affair does peter out, and Carrie doesn't say a word about this in her lifetime. But after her death, her belongings pass on to her children, and somebody is going through them, and they find a treasure trove of letters. Warren G. Harding wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters to Carrie Fulton Phillips. And I assume she wrote them to Harding, but Harding destroyed her letters. Carrie Fulton Phillips was a smart woman, and she kept every letter Harding wrote her. Now, when these letters were discovered, they were a huge deal. A court order was actually put in place because some family members wanted to destroy them. A historical society wanted to keep them. And it was ultimately decided that they should go to the Library of Congress. And these letters were sealed for 50 years so as not to embarrass any of the living relatives of anyone involved. But they were unsealed in 2014, and they're amazing. If you have read the Harding letters, sorry if you've already read them. If you haven't, get yourself like a bottle of wine, get on the Library of Congress's website, because it is just smutty, disgusting goodness. It is just some of the worst sex poetry you will ever read. I'm not going to go illicitly in depth, but this gives you an idea of the kinds of things Warren G. Harding is writing to Carrie Fulton Phillips. He definitely gets very explicit about her body in these love letters. He definitely talks about all the things that they will do together. This one always makes me laugh. I love you garbed, but naked more. Just cracks me up. You can actually see this is Harding's handwriting, my darling. This page here is actually a list of code words. So he used a lot of code words to kind of hide the intent of his letters. A couple of good quotes I like, though. Oh, Carrie mine, you can see I have written myself into wild desire. I could beg, and Jerry comes and will not go, says he loves you so, that you are his only love worthwhile in all this world. He is so utterly devoted that he only exists to give you all. I fear you would find a fierce enthusiast today. Would you like to get sopping wet out on Superior? Not the lake, for the joy of fevered fondling and melting kisses. So these letters go on, and he keeps mentioning a person, a figure, Jerry. I'll give you maybe one more Jerry quote. Wish I could take you to Mount Jerry. Wonderful spot, not in the geographies, but a heavenly place. And I have seen some passing views there and reveled in them. If you've ever gotten like an unsolicited late night text image, you probably can guess who Jerry is. If you're not sure, you can drop it in the Q&A and I will answer it later. But yes, the way in which men enjoy naming things, he named his Jerry. So this goes on for a long time. Carey Fulton Phillips ultimately does blackmail him a little bit when his political career, where he gets to the point where he's going to be president of the United States. Carey Fulton Phillips basically sort of asks for a payoff, and he and the Republican National Committee will pay off Carey Fulton Phillips for the rest of her life. So she does receive hush money to keep quiet, and she does keep quiet. But here's the thing, Harding dies in office. He dies just about a year and a half in office. And after he dies, another woman comes forward because she had been paid off by Harding. Harding dies, the money stopped, and Harding's widow refused to continue payments. So this woman, oh, this is another one of his love quotes. Yeah, they're something. They're special. This woman will come forward. Her name is Nan Britton. She was another mistress of Harding. So he's actually cheating on Carey Fulton Phillips with Nan Britton. Nan Britton comes forward after his death. She has a pretty scandalizing story to tell, and she has a daughter who happens to look quite a bit like Warren G. Harding. She asks for money from Harding's widow. Harding's widow says no, so Nan Britton writes a book. It is called The President's Daughter, and it is saucy. It basically talks about her being a teenager, falling in love with Harding. She talks about losing her virginity on Harding's desk at work. She talks about traveling with Harding. She talks about all the things he made her do. She talks about going into these parties and rooms and Harding and his friends having their way with her. She talks about sneaking into the White House and having sex in a White House closet while Secret Service agents stand outside to guard the door. And she talks, of course, about her daughter, who is fathered by Warren G. Harding. Now, this book is, of course, a bestseller, but it is kind of being sold a little bit like pornography. It's direct mail. That's the only way you can get it. No reputable person will sell it. It comes to your door wrapped in like brown paper bags. But Nan Britton does make money sort of selling this book. Now, of course, throughout the lifetime of Harding and his living relatives, everyone will deny the parentage of Nan Britton's daughter. But there was DNA testing done just a few years ago that confirms, or close to confirms, that Nan Britton was very likely telling the truth. So that is just as short as I can make it, a little overview of some of the scandals in and around the White House and around Lafayette Square Park. I definitely want to give people a chance to ask questions if you guys have any questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen so that you guys can pop in. But let me know if you have questions about anything. You can Google more Harding stuff. I didn't want to get too explicit. It's like more embarrassing having to say it on a computer than in person.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was so much fun and interesting. So yeah, we're going to start allowing everybody to open your video. So this will just take a minute. So yeah, please just be ready. We highly encourage that. We want to meet you. We want to see you. And then you can ask your questions directly to Rebecca, or we can just, I don't know, you can share us your stories.
And thank you once again, Rebecca. That was excellent. That was, I mean, can't imagine you do anything else other than that, because that was a wonderful experience, a great way to learn history that I am willing to bet a majority of people would not know this otherwise. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're
and
very
ladies
welcome.
and gentlemen, yeah, if you want to, once again, her website is atourofherown.com. So if you're interested in the DC tours, or hopefully in DC area, if things come to light in sometime in the future, definitely check her out. This has been a wonderful experience, and if you've been here throughout the whole event, which a majority of you actually have, which has been wonderful, definitely let people know about this to have their own opportunity with Rebecca.
Yeah, and this is actually a tour I do with DC by Foot. So check us out too, DC by Foot. We also have a great YouTube channel with a lot of more in-depth video virtual tours up and down Embassy Row. You know, we all through the city. We did Capitol Hill when that was still open. And so if you want to get some kind of on the ground video and live guiding on site, you can find that on the Free Tours by Foot, DC by Foot YouTube channel.
Okay, hey, welcome. Hi, I know Brian and Ronan. So yeah, please help us with your video. So who would like to start with a comment or a question?
If no one else has a question, maybe I'll jump in. Thanks for the great presentation, Rebecca. Just curious, I know it's broad strokes, but do you think it's harder to get the realities of what happened 100 years ago when there maybe not that many records left, or scandals that happened in the last few decades when there are a lot of people who probably still want to keep it quiet?
That's a really good question. One good thing about the past is people wrote down so much. There's so much written record. And if you get something like people's personal letters, if people don't burn or destroy them, there can be a lot of stuff that never saw the light of day in the press, but through personal correspondence or diaries or journals we can find. Today, I think it can be a little bit harder because there is a lot of there's moneyed interest in keeping things quiet, and there's all sorts of things. But I guess if you were a better digital forensic scientist, you could probably find people's secrets. But for the average historian, I feel like it's harder because people don't just put it all in a treasure trove of letters. I will say, as a historian and a tour guide, anything that people do today that gets them into trouble, corruption, bribery, adultery, any of it, that all happened back then too. We sometimes think that the politicians of the past were purer or better, and maybe some were, but a lot of them were just human.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Would anybody like to ask something to Rebecca, or just share a fun story? I do know that LBJ also had like some
jumbo.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So the only two presidents that I know of that had the nicknames were Harding's Jerry and LBJ's Jumbo. LBJ was a very colorful character. He used his height and size to intimidate people, doing the thing with the drinks, right? Try to get people drunk and keep himself sober. He could be a bit of a bully. He could be a bit much. He had a very I think very proto-masculine style. He would do a lot of things to emasculate others, like make his staff, take correspondence from him when he was like in the bathroom and, do stuff like that just to intimidate people. He was also obsessed with the shower at the White House and the fact that he wanted like a shower with 10 or 20 jets that were like sandblasting him. And he got angry his whole presidency because the plumbing in the White House could not support the shower experience he wanted. But yeah, his nickname was Jumbo, which is, I don't know, optimistic, I guess.
Who else? What about Anthony or Brian or Catherine?
It doesn't have to be about anything naughty.
Yeah. Okay. And my name is Brianna. I am the programs coordinator, and I am so happy to see you here and to welcome you to our new project. So this is the Global Young Professionals. So our goal is just to help each other network, grow our community, give you resources, either professionally or just for personal enhancement. Just get to know you better. Hopefully later in the spring or in the fall, we can finally meet in person. But we just wanted to welcome you, kind of learn what your ideas are. What would you like to see from these programs? Etc. And also, we also launched our LinkedIn page. So it's Global Young Professionals Greater Houston. So also connect with us via that channel. And yes, just kind of meet casually, but for a productive and positive goal. So would anybody like to introduce yourselves and just say something?
If nobody has any tour questions, I'm going to hop off to let you guys network. But thank you guys so much. It was so fun to be here. You can check out our websites, but have a great rest of your week. Hopefully everyone's nice and warm and safe. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And once again, her information is on the chat panel, so you can see either her dcbyfoot.com or a tourofherown.com if you'd like to check her out and find out more. So thank you once again. Thank you for joining us. Second, what Viri said, it's an organization. Now, you may have been with us. I see lots of faces here. I see.
Oh, he froze, unfortunately. Okay.
Yep. Can you hear me? Am I good?
Yes.
Like cutting off? Oh, sorry. But anyway, so thank you all for coming. And once again, we're going to try a new effort this year to try to get more involved in our global young professionals environment, because we know networking is coming at a premium at this time, since the connections can be kind of interspersed throughout these last few months, this last year. So we'd like to kind of get this group going to see what you guys would like, and kind of who you guys are, so we can develop this into a more robust program with lots of activities and resources for everyone else coming forward. So once again, let me just start off with myself. My name is Jahan Jaffapour. I'm the Member Services Manager at the World Affairs Council. I've been here for about 4 years, almost 3.5, almost 4 years. Yeah, so it seems great to have a young professional group here. We did kind of take a back seat a couple years back, but we slowly brought it together, brought it up here. If you're with us this past year, we've done a lot of career building workshops, and it's been great for people, but we'd also like to have a little more fun into it. So hence we had this program today, a little bit different from our usual programs, if you guys are familiar with our programs. But we thought it would be a nice interactive, a kind of a different approach, that would help also young professionals and kind of be more of interest to us. So once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. And yeah, let's find out a little more about each other.
Yeah, so just raise your hand and then open your.
I'll go.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Say. I'm an MBA student at Rice, and I actually heard about this through Jahan. We went to school together before at St. Thomas. Feels like a long time ago. But I thought it was pretty cool that you're starting a young professionals group for people interested in global matters. That's really great. It being in Houston, this is perfect. We should have that. And it's actually cool that we're virtual right now, because we can bring people from everywhere in. So just, I thought that the Scandals tour was like a really good icebreaker. That was a good warm up. So thank you for inviting me to that.
Thanks for coming, Catherine.
Brian?
Yes, I'll go next. My name's Brian Harper, and I am a former student at University of St. Thomas, where I actually met Viri, and she's the one that invited me. And I just recently completed my master's in international studies.
Nice. Oh yeah, so I'm also an international studies person too, so welcome to the gang.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's all right if you don't want to introduce yourself. Again, we just wanted to launch it, welcome everybody, tell you that we're here. And before we say goodbye, you will all participate in a giveaway. So we will give one membership, one program, and one book. So just please look at your inbox tomorrow. It might be that our emails land on your spam folder. So if you would help us with that, that'd be wonderful. And then also please sign up for our newsletter. That's where all of our programs are listed. We have a lot of content also, like either our YouTube channel, or we have a lot of articles and pictures that we're sure you will enjoy. So yeah, thank you again. We wish you a wonderful evening, and our ears are open. So call us or write to us or send us a message on LinkedIn. So we're here for you. And as I said, like, this is meant for everybody, to help everybody in the Houston community.
Yeah, so once again, it's the internet.
Yeah, and Jahan just added our email addresses on the chat. So if you want to just save them.
Yeah, so like I said, we're kind of in our nascence right now. So if you do have any ideas, or there's some things you'd like to look for our young professionals group going forward before we start planning it all, we'd love to get your input. And hopefully, if you guys can be a part of this, if we can get this going, be a bigger part of this group here. And we'd love to see people take on a lot of things and kind of grow together as members and staff here at the council for this new young professionals group. So once again, if you have any ideas or any questions, our emails are in the chat. Feel free to shoot us an email, and if you have any questions, and otherwise, be on the lookout for some emails from us and our next upcoming programs throughout the year.
And maybe just lastly, I'm probably a little bit out of the young professionals age group, but I'm Ronan. Some of you I recognize. Great to see you here. And I'm the director of programs, and I'm super lucky to have Viridiana and Jahan as my excellent colleagues. And I'm excited to get the young professionals up and moving, up and running again. Not about 4 or 5 years ago, we had it, very big and very vibrant. In our typical events, we had kind of 50 to 80 people attend. And we hope to get back to in-person events too. Maybe it might be 4 or 6 months. But it was a lot of fun, and I think it was a great way for people to meet like-minded people. People are interested in what's going on around the world, and a good way to network and also just have a good time. So I thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Well, thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening and see you soon.
All right. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.